Welcome to the New Flat Rate Podcast, your podcast to learn the newest things that are happening in the industry.
Mike, tell us about bench builders if you don't mind. What's
I'd
bench builders?
be happy to. As you well know, I come out of an HR background, and for 20 plus years, I led HR teams. And those teams supported companies that started small and got much bigger. Bench Builders is really a
Mm,
business coaching group. We help organizations oftentimes that are growing and are experiencing growing pains. And the kinds of ways that we typically
mm,
help companies is they realize, goodness gracious, we're promoting from within, that's great, but we're really not training these managers on how to manage effectively. So the two things we typically
mm,
focus on is help them solve both their process and people problems.
mm. That's such a great intro. Thank you for that because it shows that you are the right person for us to be having the conversation today with about how to manage effectively a remote workforce. So, but before we dive into that, I want to know a little bit more about you so that our audience knows who they're listening to. So, Mike, I know that you live actually in Dalton, Georgia, here where the New Flat Rate is, here in our hometown, and it's a small world sometimes. So it was really fun. Mike and I met, I guess, you think maybe a year ago, we were introduced to each other
That sounds
from a
right.
mutual friend maybe about a
That's
year
right.
ago. And so we've been following each other ever since. And I'm really excited to have Mike on the show today so that I can introduce him to all of you guys. Mike, do you have any, maybe what are your hobbies? What led you into where you are now? And why do you love business? That's three
Mm.
questions.
Let me see if I can answer all of those in due turn. I shared that I come out of an HR background. HR is a profession that when people get into, they tend to stay in. There's
Mm,
something that kind of draws them in and keeps them in. I was very fortunate right out of college to be able to get an opportunity to go into HR and learn HR really from the ground up.
mm,
And as companies get bigger, they realize that they need people who can kind of specialize in certain areas. So I had the good opportunity to develop kind of specialization in employment and employee relations, managing compensation systems, benefit systems. Then you get into things like safety and workers' compensation. And as an organization gets bigger, their their reputation in the community gets more and more um, important. So I found myself kind of representing the company from a community relations standpoint. I say all that is that HR is pretty diverse, but small companies oftentimes, if they even have an HR department, they're small and
mm-hmm,
they're spread very, very thin. So about 10 years ago, I kind of broke away from a corporate HR role and really began focusing on helping small to mid-sized growing companies do the things you got to do to support the growth. And the kinds of things that we do are just real practical. And I say that because that more is a reflection of me. Um, I just think when you're working with clients, they just need good common sense solutions, solutions that they can own. And all I'm doing is come along as a guide to help them put those solutions in place. That's a little bit about my professional progression. Personally, I did my undergraduate work at a college where I met what is now my wife. So I married my college sweetheart.
awesome.
We've been married for quite some time. We have three now adult sons, and they have all done very, very well. But if you ask, what is a source of pride for us, is that we're just so fortunate to have three great sons
Mm.
who two are already married, and one has already produced our first grandchild, which
Yay.
didn't see that one coming as fast as it did, but it did. So the things that we enjoy most, if it's involving the family, that's what we're doing. That's what actually led us to move to Dalton. We were
Mm-hmm.
living about 45 minutes away in Chattanooga, and we decided to move to Dalton because we wanted to have a work-life balance.
What is that?
Well, that was what we aspired for, and we wanted to raise our boys. They're all three boys in a community by which they felt a sense of community. So that gives you a little bit of sense of what matters most to me and to my wife and I, yeah, it's family. And if I can marry up supporting my family in the way that I've done with supporting businesses, man, I'm a lucky guy.
Hmm. Oh, that's terrific. I know so many of us, Mike, are on our journey to freedom and finding more freedom in our lives so that we can spend more time with our families. As a culture, we've become such a busy culture, right? Especially in American society. There's a book that I've been reading. One of my coworkers actually gave it to me, and it's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
Hmm.
And it was written by a pastor in Portland, Oregon, and I mean, the first couple chapters just hit you straight to the core of how did we become so busy. And as business owners, not only are we thinking about our day job and our employees and the weight on the shoulders of growing our company, like we have a lot of responsibility as business owners, but to be able to step back and say, why are we rushing so much and missing the moments, right? It's been a good reminder for me. So I appreciate that you guys moved to Dalton so you could have more time and do what you value is have that community for your family.
Well, this has been very good for us. We're proud to be part of this community. You mentioned about business owners and how spread thin
Hmm.
they feel, and that's even particularly more true now. What we have found working with business owners is what's keeping them up at night
Hmm.
oftentimes are the people problems. And when they're not able to sleep at night, then they are not performing at their best.
Yeah.
So we focus primarily on training and coaching and working one on one with business owners. And one of the reasons why we oftentimes begin working with a business owner is they're looking for a sounding board on how to do the things they need to do to more effectively run their business, not just to run the business better. And that's obviously the goal, but to kind of begin to reclaim a sense of life.
Mm.
A business can just just wear you out.
Yeah.
That's true if business is struggling because you're worried, but there's also the exact opposite when business is growing and all you're doing is taking care of the business. So from
Hmm.
a coaching standpoint, I really enjoy working one-on-one with business owners to kind of get real clear on what is it they're trying to accomplish.
Hmm.
And more often than not is they're trying to get that sense of balance back. They're trying to remind themselves, why did I start the business to begin with? And enjoy the success and enjoy the success with people that matters most to them.
That's such a great question. Simon Sinek says it all the time, start with the why, but why did we start business? Because we're builders and we wanted to do
Mm-hmm.
something and we knew that we could, right? But then all of a sudden it takes over. So I could talk about that all day. Let's switch over for a second and talk about managing a remote workforce. We all know it's not even an elephant in the room anymore. We all know that this pandemic has changed the way that we work. It's changed the way that we order groceries. It's changed the way that we do everything. My husband said the other day we were walking through Walmart looking for, gosh, I don't even remember what. Um, Post pre-Halloween, we were looking for pumpkins, I think it was. So we're walking through Walmart, and I'm like, "Well, where's this? Where's that? Where are the diapers?" He's like, "When's the last time you were in a store?" I was like, "I don't know. I don't ever go anymore, ever."
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't tell you where anything is, as if I've never been, right? But we've all changed over the last couple of years, the last 2 years. And so when it comes to managing a remote workforce, some of our listeners today, so service providers, right, residential contractors, some of them do what's called dispatching from home. So their technicians take a service van and they take it home with them. And in the morning, they receive their work orders and their dispatches for the day to whichever customer locations they're going to go to. And they don't ever come into the office. Very rarely do they come into the office. Now, that business model, those business owners have been doing that for a long time, right? Even before the pandemic. But right now, there's many cases where there's CSRs and dispatchers and bookkeepers and the receptionists that are working from home, and they were not previously working from home. So how do we effectively manage those people? I want to start there, and then I want to circle back to how could we do a better job managing remotely our technicians, although they were already a little bit remote. But how can we do a better job connecting with them now that we have more technology? So let's start with the office staff that's working from home now.
Sure. I got a number for you. What does the number 600 mean to you?
Well, I was thinking about a movie a long time ago, but I think that was called 300. It's like an army movie. So 600, I don't know.
So I'll tell you, 600 is the number of days. We are recording this on the 2nd of November. 600 is the number of days since the World Health Organization declared COVID a pandemic,
Hmm.
which is kind of staggering. And I don't know about you, but most of our clients, when COVID hit, began looking at what they had to do as a short term matter.
Hmm.
And as you already said, what we thought was going to be short term really is and has become permanent. What's been also troubling is that as people have come to accept this new reality, they're looking around and they're really evaluating all kinds of things. And they're basically concluding what I have now from a job standpoint, I don't like.
Hmm.
Matter of fact, I'm going to basically leave. And so the term great resignation is real. So, this conversation we're having about managing remote employees, if we don't get this right,
Hmm.
we're not going to have employees to even manage remotely. So, what I would say to you is most companies in the throes of having to adapt adapted surprisingly well. And it was a
Hmm.
bit kind of a novelty. For those who are new to working from home, they really like the fact that they don't have a commute.
Hmm.
They really like the fact that they have far more flexibility. For those who've been doing it all along, this really has been kind of quote business as usual.
Yeah.
The problem is when it's business as usual, we as business owners begin to just take our employees for granted. We just assume that everything's going well. And so the kinds of things that this applies regardless of the scenario, the kinds of things that companies are struggling with working from home, it starts with communication, the communication challenges. What we hear from clients is, I still got to manage them. I still have to kind of hold them accountable for outcomes. So it raises management issues of how do you measure performance? Um, Building trust has become that much harder, particularly when you can't see them face to face.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know if this is something that you're finding with your customers, but what I'm hearing is they've lost that sense of who we are as a company.
Hmm.
They've lost that sense of camaraderie. They've lost this sense of is the team really functioning well as a team? Does it have a team spirit? We could talk about any of these kind of
Hmm.
topics, but just to kind of put back in perspective your question about those employees who were working in the office and are now working remotely.
Hmm.
Most companies, though they've got the technology to do that, have found that the employees want to have more in person interaction. And so many companies have adopted kind of a blended approach. We oftentimes refer to as kind of a hybrid approach. And that is given the employees the choice to come in certain days. Now, I use the word choice. When companies mandate that you must come back in, there's been a lot of pushback.
Hmm.
Major
Interesting.
corporations who had announced we're going to go back to the way things were in the fall of 21 have backtracked
Hmm.
on that. Apple, Google, Amazon, um, Microsoft, all of those companies said we intend to return back to the office, and they've all said no, we're going to hold that decision off until the first of the year, that is January of 22. And so what that means is there's a trickle effect on that. So what I would say is if you have employees who are working remotely, they probably like the flexibility,
Hmm.
but they may very well miss this sense of connection. And so offering the opportunity for employees to come in and work at the office can be actually embraced.
Hmm.
And it's for a lot of reasons. You get to know your company in large part by who you work with side by side.
Yeah.
And if you can't lean over and speak to a colleague, the only way you can is set up a Zoom call or a phone call.
Hmm.
It's not as easy. And so,
Not.
intentionality to give people a clear sense of what those expectations are, a clear sense of how do we take care of our customer, a clear
Hmm.
sense that you matter as an employee, and what do you need from us to make you feel valued as an employee. Everything we're describing right now has always been the case, but it's particularly the case when you've got employees who maybe for the first time are working remotely. And we started this conversation talking about why do we start businesses, and as exciting as owning a business, it can run you ragged. What we're
Hmm.
hearing is employees working from home, they're struggling from the same thing, meaning they don't sense a connection, a disconnect between work and home. And
Hmm.
so you've got to create boundaries. So I can go
Interesting.
on, but let me stop there. And
Yeah. That's so interesting. And that's from the perspective of, hey, we have to be concerned about the well being of our employees, which is so important as a business leader. From the other side, here in Dalton, we have all the carpet manufacturing companies. This is the carpet capital of the world. And so I have a lot of friends that are in mid management positions in the carpet companies. And the reason I say that is because I hear them talking frequently of, oh, I love working from home. I can go mow my lawn in the middle of the day now. I can do this, I can do that. And I get that pushback of, I'm not going back to the office because they have this freedom. But from the business owner's perspective, I mean, how is that sustainable? How do we measure to make sure that our productivity is still what it used to be? Do you think that productivity is better now because are people more focused in shorter spurts? Or do you think that we've lost some productivity being at home?
hmm, uh, I think I'd had to give you an answer that it depends. Here's what the experts say. On the whole, they're finding that productivity has actually gone up. And when they dig as to why is productivity up, is they attribute that to the flexibility that employees now have. So let me be more specific. In many roles, you mentioned customer service reps, they're basically paid for time. But there are other jobs that you are basically paying for outcomes. And when you're paying for time, an employee basically knows I have to be in this seat between these hours. And when my supervisor walks by, I need to appear busy. And they do.
Mm-hmm.
And they do what they've got to get done to kind of meet those expectations. But when you are paid for outcomes, what that means is the company is expecting certain things to happen. In certain roles, you have to be available during certain times, particularly if you're in a customer facing role. In others, people who have the ability to work in spurts, like you just mentioned, they find that they can get more done in less time. And when they're able to do that, they enjoy the freedom of being able to take that time to go mow the grass
Mm-hmm.
because it hasn't affected their productivity. If anything, there's more inspiration to go do it a little bit faster. So, what I would say to you is it depends on the role, but on the whole, home has resulted in improved productivity, but there are other challenges that's opened up the can of worms for.
Right. Yeah, interesting. I like how you separated that into the time or the outcome based management styles, really, and depending on the role, right? We could take a look at that. Let's talk about technicians for a second. Let's say they are dispatched from home, they take their trucks home, they're out on the road all the time. How can we make them feel more a part of the team so that we don't lose that team culture? It's we've been doing it for a long time. A lot of people have been dispatching this way, but they don't have morning meetings. And now, one thing that I would suggest is, even if they're dispatched from home, there's a 7:30 meeting or there's an 8 o'clock meeting every day. And if it needs to be on Zoom, then it can be company wide to make sure that everybody is unified and moving towards the same outcome and execution, right? We have morning meetings so that we can focus on execution of what we're supposed to be doing. So do you have any suggestions for that?
I do. If companies got away from morning meetings, I would encourage them to resume, not for the sake of just having a meeting, but
Mhm.
bringing everybody together at the beginning of the day creates a sense of we are together. We need to be able to function as a team. When you come together at the beginning of the day, everybody knows what everybody else is kind of working on. And so that they can kind of
Mhm.
be aware of what might be coming down the pipeline. But coming together just to kind of do a quick check-in, that's part of it. But another part is you can use that daily check-in to build that sense of awareness. It's a great opportunity to kind of share with what's going on and maybe in other parts of the business. Um,
Mhm.
there is there's a real need for people to still feel a sense of connection. And so what we are encouraging our clients, and this equally applies to technicians, a structured daily check-in is important. We
Mhm.
suggest going a step further. If you are managing a remote employee, a daily check-in is very helpful, but we also are encouraging a one-on-one at least every other week, but once a week. And that is where you have a conversation, kind of like how we started the podcast.
Mhm.
This is a conversation that may not necessarily be work. It's a conversation. Tell me what's going on in your world. Um, and what it does is it kind of adds the human element back into the mix. So
Mhm.
our encouragement is daily check-ins for sure. One-on-ones, we recommend once a week. It doesn't have to be a long meeting, but if you're going to have a one-on-one, make it sincere. Don't
Mhm.
just go through the motions. Ask questions and really listen to what they say. Because more often than not, what employees need is to feel like they've been heard.
Mhm.
It's also in that one-on-one an opportunity if they have some issues that they need help on that you can ask, is there anything I can be helpful to you with? And you're positioning yourself as their boss, as a source to them. So it's very commonsensical, daily check-in and then one-on-one. But I would also say that you don't want to miss opportunities, particularly in these daily check-ins. If a daily check-in is a short meeting, you may need to periodically have a check-in with everybody that's a little bit longer. And in that meeting, that's when you share what's going on in the business. That's what you share about new customers. That's when you share about new processes. That's when you kind of begin to convey, here's who we are. This is what we believe. And we evidence that by the kinds of ways that we take care of our customers. You can feature somebody who had a kind of a success story. So it's really designed to just bring people back together. And really, all you're trying to do is embrace technology to do what hopefully you were already doing. And if you got away from it, our encouragement, get back to it. It's again, everything we're talking about, Danielle, it's just practical, commonsensical.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy to get away from the basics, right? Uh, just because times are changing. And last year we were all kind of like, oh, what's the world looking like? What's the future going to be? But the basics are still foundational to run in business. So I like how you've said that there's different kinds of meetings. There's the one-on-one check-ins with your employees so that they know that they're heard and valued. And then there's the team company meetings that might just be once a week that we need for process training, things that have changed, for testimonies, for what's going on with customers, for projects, for updates, and just the overall, hey, synergy of these are our core values and where we're going together as a company. And so that's not a difficult meeting. I know that a lot of people stop having meetings meetings because they don't know what to talk about in the meetings, or they
Mhm.
feel like their time is not very valuable in those meetings. So it's simple. It's going back to the basics in those company meetings. You can go over your mission statement again. You can go over your core values again. You can go over, hey, here's our target neighborhoods and here's how we like to serve. Something else that is easy to train on in a company meeting is called the life cycle or the service call life cycle.
Mm.
So the expectation and processes of, hey, in the mornings when you get your dispatch, this is what your day is supposed to look like. This is how we arrive on site. This is how we get out of our van and how and where we park. This is how we approach and greet the customer. This is how we go and get our tools. This is how we present our pricing. This is how we follow up. This is how we do our paperwork and our payment. This is how we send a thank you after the service call or after the installation. This is how we ask for a referral. This is how we ask for a review. Like the whole life cycle of the service call, we expect, and we often train off by osmosis, we expect that when a new employee comes on board and we tell them, hey, this is how it works at our company, we expect them to remember that forever, right? But over time, we all forget and we get into our own habits. And so that's a very easy thing to go back to and just reiterate in weekly team training the different pieces of what the life cycle is supposed to look like. And also role playing customer service, answering the phone, right? And we say around here, if you're not practicing together, then you're practicing on your customer.
Mm.
And you don't want your employees practicing with your customer. You want them practicing with you so that when they're talking to your customer and they're the front face of your company, they're actually doing it to excellence, right? So those are simple things that we could bring into meetings, and we weren't even just going to talk about meetings, but it's really important to reestablish these basic meetings with your team, especially while managing remotely, to make sure that everybody remembers their responsibilities
Well,
and the
Daniel,
requirements of being a part of your team.
I'll go back to my corporate days. I went to meetings after meetings after meetings, and by and large, they just sucked.
Totally.
Totally sucked. And therefore, I made a decision if I'm going to be a leader, if I'm going to have a meeting, this meeting is going to have meaning.
Hmm.
And that if you're invited to the meeting, you're there for a purpose, and we want you to contribute to that. You mentioned a few minutes ago the expectations about the life cycle,
Hmm.
and you listed 10, 12 touch points, if you would. I remember early in this conversation, we are talking about the two issues that seems to bog business owners down. It's
Hmm.
process and people problems. If you have a process as disciplined as what you just shared, Danielle, and that is, here is our expectation, you as a technician, and you're paying attention to those level of details, you're giving them structure.
Yeah.
And in doing that, you're kind of walking them through from literally from start to finish. And you're basically saying when you pull out of the driveway, our job's not done. You mentioned
Hmm.
about the follow up, is that just by reinforcing your process, what you're reinforcing is this is why we do what we do, and
Mm.
this is what differentiates us. Our competitors, they don't do these things.
Right.
And guess what? When we do these things, it matters to our customers. And who do our happy customers talk to? Others. And by paying attention to these kinds of things, it's a way to basically convey it's in your best interest because
Hmm.
that customer will invite us back. And when we're invited back, that means that we can continue to grow our company and take care of our employees for doing that. But we are trying to keep that customer centeredness in front of, but you're making it real. And I don't know about you, but oftentimes in your industry, if you got technicians, you've got to have technicians who understand what they're doing. But I would sense that what you are doing and the customers that you support, it's not enough just to know how to fix it.
Hmm.
You need to be able to fix it in a way that the customer feels as if this is fixed in a way that they are very happy with.
Hmm.
And that requires attention to the relationship with the customer. It's paying attention to the courtesies of where to park the van, what to do with your equipment when you come in. All the things you're kind of talking about, customers notice, and it's the little things that add up.
It really is. We train and teach on doing wow factor. And so after you do the repair, making sure that you do something that's a visible wow factor so the customer knows that you went above and beyond to
Mm.
serve them, because we are looking for that long-term relationship and we want them to be happy with our company so that they call us back and refer us to their friends. There's a lot of, I don't know if fear is the right word, but the outlook of the future, what's going to happen are some of these large players, the large corporate players in America are going to come in and swoop up all of the service providers, all of our companies. Are robotics going to take over the home services? Are we going to be obsolete in the future? There's some fear about that. And everybody that I talk to, it seems to be a common trend to say, wait a minute, people still like people. And if we can provide great customer service and value through that by being loving and caring and compassionate and showing empathy with our customers and providing wow factor, then we don't have to worry about the other,
Mhm.
or at least not for a long time. Well, managing a remote workforce, we've hit on a couple great things today. The importance of touching base with our team and taking a look at the productivity, recognizing that studies are showing they're probably more productive than they were before, and and giving yourself some grace on that. And it's a practice that's ongoing. Many of us thought that, hey, this is going to come and go, but it's still here. And so practicing it ongoing and getting better and better at it is really going to take us far. Mike, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate all the insights that you've shared with us. Are there any books that you're reading, podcasts you're listening to, um, anything that you'd like to leave us with that has been inspirational to you lately?
Hmm. I'm going to reach across. I'm going to share a book that I just started. Um, it has been out for a little while, but it's called Atomic Habits.
Oh,
Atomic Habits. And here's what's really interesting about that. When you see term is it's tiny changes, remarkable results.
hmm,
That's the kind of the tagline for that. And here's what I'm just kind of learning, and that is when we're working with clients, sometimes there are big things that need to be done.
yeah,
And because of that, they kind of go, oh, we can't even tackle that. And what I would
totally.
say is that when you have a tough problem, break it down into more bite-sized pieces. And that what the challenge is, and I've just started not only reading the book, I actually have it, so I'm listening to it on Audible as well on my run. But what I'm finding is incremental improvement over whatever it is you're doing, professionally or personally. Incremental improvement pays off in the long run. And that's kind of what I would
Mm,
probably say as to what I'm trying to embrace is we've got big challenges ahead of us. We don't know exactly what lies ahead. That's what we do know. Stick to your knitting. Do what you do best. Do what you have passion for. And if you want to do it better, recognize that better can be done incrementally.
mm,
You have to do is be very consistent. This book, Atomic Habits, it has to be a habit for a prolonged period of time before it becomes the actual practice. So what I
mhm.
would probably say in terms of the latest that I'm reading, that's what I'm reading, and I'm really just early into the book. But I think it applies to me as a business owner. I suspect it would apply to
Mhm.
all business owners, and that is don't throw your
Yeah,
hands up. It is doable. That if you need help, there are very capable people out there who really enjoy coming along and helping.
yeah,
And in helping, recognize that the things that need to be done, the big things, you'll get there, but you got to be persistent.
hmm,
And if you're persistent over time, it becomes habit, and incremental change pays off in the long run.
I'm so glad you shared that book. I can't wait to get it and read it. It's something that I've been working on with my team too, just saying, hey, we don't have to try to 10x and this and that. Like, let's look for 1% improvements in our daily processes. And so, taking your habits and making incremental changes, I love how you say that. It's how you're going to get there in the long run and over time. Very helpful. Thank you, Mike. Something else I wanted to share for anybody listening in, two resources that I've found very helpful if you're having a hard time hiring right now. I know that it's easy to see signs all over when you go to town, go to restaurants. Hey, please be patient with us. There's a national hiring crisis. And it's true also in the trades. People are having a harder time finding technicians and service providers. And so I've got two downloads I'd like to share with you. One is a hiring matrix to help make sure that you have the right job ads in the right areas, because all these different things in this matrix help to get us to where we need to be with our hiring. And the next is a job scorecard. How often do we hire out of emotion? We say, oh, I need somebody, life is stressful, or I'm having this issue at the company, and we hire out of an emotion without a clear pathway of what the responsibilities of that position are going to be and the requirements. And we need a check-in time of, hey, that employee or that position has been filled for 1 week, 3 weeks, 6 months. And then what are the benchmarks to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be as a company, providing the right training resources, and also from the new employee standpoint, making sure that they are delivering what the expectation is for their position. So these two downloads I love to provide to you. Just reach out. There will be a link in the show notes to do that, and I'd be happy to send this to you. And then, Mike, is there a way that people can contact you if they have any questions or would like to talk more?
I'll be happy to pass along. The name of my business is Bench Builders. You can find us at bench-builders.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with anybody if you'd like to connect. And if we are connected, it also gives them opportunity. We distribute a weekly blog that deals with timely topics. It's usually a short read, but if you want to do that, you can subscribe either through to sending me a note on LinkedIn or go to bench-builders.com, go to the resource page, and you can only go to the blog section and subscribe. If you also like this format, this is how Danielle and I got to know each other a little bit better, because I actually had you as a podcast guest on the Get Unstuck and On Target podcast. And so she was an excellent guest, and I would encourage you, go to the website, download the episode with Danielle. She shared some great insights, and you'd see her on the opposite end of the microphone. She was a guest, not the host. She was a perfect guest. So that would be the way to reach out. But I appreciate the opportunity to spend time with you. Danielle, I'm really impressed with your company. I'm particularly
Thank you.
impressed with the things you're doing for your clients. Those two resources, let me encourage the people who are watching and listening to this, take advantage of that. That sounds like a perfect thing that a business owner could really benefit from.
I appreciate that. It means a lot. And the internet was breaking up just a little bit when Mike said his podcast, which is Get Unstuck and On Target. So definitely add that to your podcast channel. He's got excellent guests on there and excellent content. Cool. Well, hey, Mike, it's been a blast talking to you this morning. I really appreciate you taking the time. It means a lot to us, and for the insight that you've shared with our audience. I know that you've got a lot of wisdom, and we really appreciate that.
My pleasure, Danielle.